William Johnson emigrated to America from Ireland during the colonial period, settling in the Mohawk Valley, ultimately to run estates of a relative of his. And during that time, acquired his own massive amounts of property in the New World, but also became a very keen observer of Native American affairs near him in this area. In fact, he was able to work within Native systems of government and cultural exchange that made him a trusted source for both the natives and for the British administration. This was rewarded by roles within the British administration and military affairs during the 7 Years' War, what is known often as the French and Indian War, when Johnson was made a general of provincial forces leading an attack on the French in the Lake George region in 1755. He was ultimately, for his success in blunting a French attack, rewarded with a baronetcy, a title of nobility, becoming that rare breed of people living in America elevated to the ranks of the English peerage. He also, for his diplomatic role and his significance and prominence within Native societies, was made superintendent of Indian affairs and allowed to translate British government policy for Native Americans during the conflict, ultimately bringing many of the Haudenosaunee along the side of the British by the end of the war against the French and their Native allies. In doing this, Johnson was able to accumulate an enormous amount of power, prestige, and land during the period between the French and Indian War and the American Revolution. Prints of him like this were printed back in England, showing this new nobleman that had been created out of the colonial world. And it's important to remember that his negotiations with Native peoples were not part and parcel of the negotiations with the French, but separate deals. This newspaper, the London Gazette from 1764, outlines the peace treaty that he was able to broker with a former enemy, the Seneca, that gained the British important territorial concessions and new relationships with those Haudenosaunee people in what would become Western New York. Johnson's rise to power, though, ended somewhat abruptly in 1774 when he died just before the American Revolution began, leaving the world to wonder what role he might have played had he been there to broker diplomatic negotiations between the Haudenosaunee peoples, the American colonists, and the British government.